I'm Gold Derby News and Features editor Ray Richmond, and I'm welcoming Steve Saklad from the Lionsgate feature, Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, to our film production designers Meet the Experts panel. Steve, your film that's based on the classic Judy Blume novel is set in 1970. What are your own memories from that time that you were able to draw on?
Oh, well, I'm a lucky one because I turned 14 in 1970. So I have not quite as young as Margaret, who was 11 in the movie, but almost as young memories of uh, our suburban upbringing. I grew up in suburban Connecticut and suburban Philadelphia, which was a great matchup for the world of Margaret. We would drive into New York City in the 60s and 70s, 60s and early 70s. And I had a sense memory of what it felt like to walk those Greenwich Village streets and take it all in as a child takes it in. I had two Jewish grandmas. I was raised Jewish, so touching the core of who she was and what her Upper West Side apartment should look like was very familiar to me. It felt very at home. And there were all sorts of ways that, though I'm not an 11-year-old girl, I could very much dial into to the world that Judy Blume first created, and then Kelly Fremont Craig, our writer-director, sort of turned into the feature world. Kelly did an amazing job because she actually enlarged the story to include Margaret's mom, Margaret's grandmother. We got generational views on the relationship between a mom and a daughter as they sort of go through huge changes in each other's lives. So I think Kelly found a way for folks my age, folks in their 40s, folks in their 70s to all connect to the story of Margaret growing up, which is sort of juicy.
I've seen, Steve, in past interviews with you where you're talking about matching the personalities of the girls and the women with various color and textural palettes for the look of the interiors and furnishings, which I found fascinating. I mean, is that usually the production designer's job?
Well, the production designer's job is really to make the story as clear to the audience as you possibly can. And what are the tools we've got to do that with? We've got architecture, we've got color, we've got the nuance of set decoration, we've got props, and we've got lighting, which sort of colors everything we do. So every tool is really useful to sort of say, who are each of the people who built the world that we're looking at? How many choices did the mom make in Margaret's bedroom, and how many choices did Margaret herself make? Margaret's an only child, but then we meet Nancy Wheeler, who lives a more upper class suburban life. And we believe her mom had a decorator who made a foofy 8-year-old's bedroom, 3 years earlier than our story. And now poor Nancy is stuck in this 8-year-old's bedroom of chiffon and ruffles and lavender and other things that she detests now. So to use the color palette and use our history that we're giving to Nancy and her relationship with her mom informs every choice we make in that bedroom. And when Nancy wants to rebel against this stricture of what she grew up with, we have pops of orange and sort of acidic chartreuse added to the palette that her mom had devised. And we have her images of Twiggy on the wall, or Jean Shrimpton, these great models of the late 60s, which would have been Nancy's templates for how she wants to grow up. So we get to sort of touch who she is with the color, the specifics of the images, the idea that behind a neat dust ruffle is all the crap that Nancy stuck that she doesn't want her mom to see. So all of that goes into sort of forming that world. And I'm a theater trained designer. So for me, the best way into each of these spaces is to sit down with a roll of onion skin and sketch it. And there might be a few other folks on the panel today who also have that as their background. For me, I think there's nothing more strong a training than to have sort of faced the script as a theater designer. And there are no other people. There's just you to choose the color, the decor, the details, the props. So I think to sort of sit down with those ideas in my head and the onion skin and my markers and my inks and find my way to a design, share with the director, share with the DP and my decorator, and get feedback and adjust it, is the best possible way to sort of get everybody on the same page. And if we are together on here's what it feels like to walk into that space from this sketch, then I think we'll have a great, opening of the set when the director and the DP come in and start their work.
Well, I love the detail-oriented nature of how you approach your job. How did you go about creating the diverse looks, Steve, of, for instance, Margaret's suburban family home in New Jersey, her Jewish grandma Sylvia's apartment in New York City, while you're shooting in Charlotte, North Carolina?
Yeah, Charlotte, North Carolina turned out to be this great, juicy source that had not been exploited by movie companies much before. They had superb crews that we sort of got the A-class crew when we got there in the middle of a pandemic. I felt very taken care of by my team, who was almost all local. And we had a pretty great match for suburban New Jersey all over Charlotte. We had lots of choices for those various homes, and we had, we could exploit a split level for Margaret. We could exploit a traditional colonial for Nancy Wheeler. We had a host of other houses that showed up in bits and pieces over the seasons that the movie depicts. But we had a real struggle finding New York City in Charlotte, as you might imagine. We actually found one street that worked as a commercial street that was a half hour outside of Charlotte for our main exterior, where we want to sell the sort of West Greenwich Village life that Margaret enjoys before she moves to New Jersey. And for the Upper West Side apartment for Sylvia, the grandmother, who's lived there for 40 years, Charlotte offered a bland, beige, drywall apartment that was several rooms to it, to which my team came in and we built the pilasters, the framed panels of wallpaper, the color palette, the French doors, the years and years of decor that Sylvia has brought to that space, all of her evidence of her travels to Europe and the Far East. The ketubah, which was the marriage covenant of her husband, who's passed away in the story. The Hadassah tin box that every Jewish grandmother of a certain age had, where you would put in your quarters to grow trees in Israel. Well, that Hadassah tin box had to be made and set there just so on the mantle. So we sort of started from 0 and went to 100 to create the world of Sylvia in that apartment.
You also got to turn Charlotte into Greenwich Village in 1970. I mean, that just had to be such a tremendous kick. Public phone booths in Greenwich Village, hippie folk singer flyers, a bakery and a barbershop and a pizzeria, and also the Port Authority bus terminal. That had to just be so much fun.
It was so much fun. I moved to New York officially in 1980. So I'm about 10 years too late for my real memories of living in Greenwich Village as a resident. But we came to New York. We saw Broadway shows as we were growing up. We drove into the city, and we had this really vivid memory of the kind of the smell, the noise, the sweet smell of pot, hovering along the streets. It was not dangerous in a way, but it was very exotic to somebody who'd been raised in the suburbs. So we wanted to get that exoticism on screen. What you saw in the finished movie was about 4 facades that were completely signage, decorated awnings, neon, all the set dressing, the public payphones, the cars, the cast of extras in their fantastic Anne Roth clothes, which nothing is going to put you in the right time and place better than what Anne Roth can costume her extras with. And then we had to set extend for everything beyond those four facades. We had a reverse, which was okay, but looking up and down the street, that was set extension to research that we had provided the visual effects team of which streets in Manhattan in 1970 we were using.
What was the biggest design challenge you faced for doing this film? Would it have been making it Greenwich Village or something else?
The juiciest day, the one that we were sort of planning the hardest and the longest for, was actually those 10 minutes of Pirates of Penzance that happens in the Delacorte Theater in Central Park, for which we placed in an empty parking lot in the middle of Charlotte a pie piece of the bleachers that the audience sat on, and then a half-round disc platform of the stage. There were some real trees directly behind the stage that we could exploit, and then everything else was green screened to comp in Central Park and the castle and the banks of theater lighting on grids on trusses on either side that would light the stage. But my gosh, I got to do a a 19th century Gilbert and Sullivan operetta. So we had white models. We did everything like a theater designer would do. We had the white model, which was approved. We had the digital sort of models to show the DP and so forth. And then we got to bloody well build and paint a traditional engraving laden theater set. And my theater training all came in full swing, and it was like no day was happier than the day we got to watch start the playback and watch that team of dancers and singers sort of perform that number 25 times.
How terrific. We're going to wrap things there. Steve Saklad, good luck to you this coming award season. Are you there, God? It's Me Margaret, starring Abby Ryder-Fortson, Rachel McAdams, and Kathy Bates, is available to stream over numerous platforms. Thanks for joining us today at Gold Derby.
Great, thanks.
I'm Gold Derby News and Features editor Ray Richmond, and I'm welcoming three-time Oscar nominee Arthur Max from the Sony Pictures Apple Original Films historical drama Napoleon to our film production designers Meet the Experts panel. Arthur, this is your 15th collaboration with director Ridley Scott, and you have a 16th coming next year with Gladiator 2. You must be able to read each other's minds at this point.
Pretty much.
Wow. How collaborative is Ridley with the members of his team?
Oh, very. I mean, it's a team sport with him.
So does he asks your opinion constantly about things, and he trusts your judgment?
Apparently. Yeah, no, I think it's usually a team conference every morning. And he's always very well prepared for the day, both with script notes and storyboard cartoon-like drawings, his famous Ridleygrams, which introduces whatever we were expecting. Very often it's a little nuanced on the day.
Ridleygrams. You gotta love that.
Yes.
Did
you?
They're
famous. He's been doing them from the beginning. He's an art school graduate, and I have to say, I mean, there are very few directors that I know of who can draw at the level that he does. Jean Cocteau could draw a bit. Alfred Hitchcock, I think, when he was an art director, drew his storyboards. I'm not sure, I don't want to forget anybody, but I think he's the best I know. And it's very easy then, because you see exactly the framing and the elements, the key elements of the scene. So within a very complicated situation, it does clarify what you're trying to achieve for everyone, not just for the production design, because it's a very collaborative team building process with working with him. We work sometimes with people who've been with us for long periods of time. Nobody longer than me, though. And with new people, fresh to the situation. And it makes it very interesting because it's an open forum with Ridley as well. It's not like you must do this exactly. He welcomes contributions from the people around him.
That's got to be why he's so successful, I'm sure. I mean, in part. Arthur, talk about working in the world of the 18th and 19th centuries and the kinds of opportunities and challenges that period presents architecturally for you.
Well, that was kind of the major challenge, one of them, in that we, for various reasons, decided not to go to France to do a movie about Napoleon. We love France. We'd been there just recently on The Last Duel and had a great experience. But the challenge was to find France in England and for other types of scenes, not mostly nautical scenes, but not exclusively, to go to Malta, which we knew from Gladiator originally. And I was surprised because I was disappointed not to be going to France, to the authentic locations. But the 18th century was alive and well in England, in stately homes in the London area and some further afield. And it was surprisingly rich in 18th century Baroque and earlier, which made it, quite practical to do this film there. And we had many, many choices. So there was a delightful period of scouting all the stately homes you could think of that period and style. And we took the best of a great bunch. One in particular.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say there was one location in particular called Boughton Hall, which is way up in Northumberland, about 3 hours out of London. But it was worth going there because it was a perfect replica of a French chateau built in the 18th century by an Englishman who had been stationed as a diplomat in France and fell in love with the French style and recreated this house. And it was in perfect original condition. It hadn't been restored like so many stately homes had been. And we made that the Chateau Bonaparte. And that was his residence after his marriage to Josephine and when he became a general, when he was promoted. So it was an upgrade for him. And beautiful grounds and beautiful mature oak trees everywhere and a stream and a huge, lovely approach driveway, beautifully set like a painting, which is what we were after as a design approach, which was to bring to life historical paintings of the period, which was the form of documentation at the time of major events. Didn't have CNN then.
You didn't?
No.
But you've got so much to work with, from this period, and palaces and hovels and burning villages, and it's just got to be
Yes,
like a kid in a candy store working on this.
Yes, I was, and that's typical of a Ridley epic. I mean, this is the epic of all epics, I think, because of the scale of not only basically what we did was chronicle the rise of Napoleon from a relative obscure artillery officer in his victory at the Battle of Toulon, which brought him to the attention of the Revolutionary Committee in Paris. And from there, he rose eventually and became first consul of France, and then eventually crowned himself emperor. Most of that story is recorded in monumental historical paintings, principally, but not exclusively, by Jean-Jacques David. And one of the really interesting aspects of this film was we included the character David, the painter. And in several scenes, you see him actually working, recording the event. And then we find him in other scenes working on the painting, continuing the work. And that was really interesting, recreating an 18th century artist studio, recreating the paintings, and including, the ultimate enormous 30-foot across and I think 16-foot high monumental painting of the coronation of Napoleon, which we didn't recreate completely, but sections of it, quite large sections of, had technical and artistic elements that were very challenging. I mean, the whole film was a challenge, going back to your question.
I can't even imagine working on just such a huge palette to draw from, but still, I'm sure a huge challenge.
Yes, it was, but it had its, more intimate scenes and interiors, which were quite enjoyable to do, bedrooms, drawing rooms. And in the context of the character's condition within the arc of the story, where they rise and fall all the time, it makes it very dynamic, and the changes to their lifestyle due to the revolutionary sort of tide of change going through France. And the scale was just, it's hard to find a word, monumental. The battle scenes, we didn't do all of them, I'm happy to say. We did some selected ones. The Battle of Borodino, which was Napoleon's march on Moscow and the Russian campaign. The Battle of Austerlitz, which was his victory over the Russian Austrian army. And then finally, the Battle of Waterloo. We had some others planned, and where we ultimately felt we didn't want to make a documentary about, the history of Napoleon's military campaigns, of which there were dozens. So we chose, the major ones, and tried to focus more on his arc, his rise, his journey through from obscurity to, basically the most famous person in the world, and his rather sort of tempestuous relationship with his wife and soon to be queen and empress Josephine.
Yeah,
and that made it much more rich a storytelling than just a lot of battle scenes and military spectacle. There's plenty of.
No question. We're going to wrap things there. Arthur Max, good luck to you this coming awards season. Napoleon, starring Joaquin Phoenix, is being released in theaters on November 22. Thanks for joining us today at Gold Derby.
My pleasure. See you some other time. Thank you.
I'm Gold Derby News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm welcoming Oscar nominee Suzie Davies from the Amazon MGM Studios release Saltburn to our film production designers Meet the Experts panel. Suzie, how much interaction did you have with your writer-director Emerald Fennell before you started tackling the environment the actors were going to be inhabiting?
Yeah, quite a lot. She has a very clear visual style and a particularly enigmatic style. So it took a while to try and find her visualization of this film. And that's the bit that one of the parts of my job that I enjoy the most, is just trying to work out what the storyteller wants and requires. I mean, the fact that she wrote the script as well is just so lovely for a designer, because it means all your questions, the answers are right there. So I often think that we design films in the back of the recce bus when we're traveling around, and it's, You just talk about all sorts of things that have some sort of connection with the film. So my thought was we'd be doing that for a month, looking for this particular property, Saltburn. And we did have a few days of recceing where it was all about the question and answers. I'm very aware of the time constraints on movies that of this sort of scale. You know, the director has pulled in so many different directions that you have to really use your time wisely. So it's about asking the right questions, getting open answers. But Emerald is a force, and she knows exactly what she wants. Very quick decision making. And I think once I found the groove, off we went, and you know, it was all bigger, bolder, louder, ruder, wherever possible. And that was just a joy. Yeah, it was great fun to do once we'd found that.
Suzie, when you first read the script, what immediately sprung to mind in terms of how the Saltburn house should look?
The main thing was it needed to feel a lived-in environment in every which way. Although it's set in 2006, we treated it like a period film. And anyway, this story could have happened in any period. This story of desire and want and love and hate and everything that goes on could be in any century. So it was about not only that, but also I'd felt that the script needed to feel that these characters really lived in these environments. I wanted people to be desiring of what they saw, so everything needed to look beautiful. But I wanted the beauty to slightly change, and then sometimes it would be almost sleazy, almost ugly, but almost beautiful, almost decadent. So you're sort of taken on. The maze was a very good metaphor for all of us to think, oh, we're going down this route. And it was something, you know, we wanted the audience not only to look at the visuals, but we spoke a lot about all the other senses: smell, taste. You know, all the food that's eaten in this film was really, we really researched all of that, because it's about eating the rich and eating the desire of eating. So, you know, even for instance, the seafood dinner party, it was like finding the most handsome crab, finding the most ugly looking octopus so that we could frame it and the composition. And I think working with our DOP just gave us that fantastic opportunity to try and create what looks like oil paintings at the beginning. Like, obviously there's a Caravaggio reference, but we went through the spectrum. But by the end of the movie, we wanted the feeling of that painting to be dripping under the heat of the story, getting slightly more unhinged and everything merging, and you could smell it, and, you know, very visceral feelings. We wanted to sort of try and touch every feeling that an audience member might have.
Well, you did. There's so much going on in this movie.
There's a lot going on.
Oh my God. It must have been fun though, Suzie, to be let loose on that country estate. How much freedom did you have to alter and augment the existing space?
Yeah, ridiculous amount. I filmed in just about every country house in the UK, as have probably all designers on this program, and there's very few left that haven't been filmed in. And we knew Emerald was really keen on having something that no one had seen before, that was slightly different. And when we found this house, which we found very fortuitously by hook and by crook, you know, a sort of word got out and word came back, this house turned up, and I definitely had an Oliver moment driving up to the property. It's nestled in the countryside, it's languishing, it's very powerful, and the fact that it's owned by a private family, and that family have lived there since 1066, there's history there, and because it's private, and because they loved the story and they loved Emerald, they allowed us to have free reign, more or less. They lived there whilst we shot there. You know, we had our video village and unit base in one of the fields around the corner. So it was an extraordinary summer, but they let me paint their walls. They let me take down their oil paintings, change the tapestries, you know, completely change a run of rooms, build a bathroom where there wasn't, take another bathroom out, remove radiators, the lot. Like, it couldn't have been better, and that enabled us to have this composite set. So we see Oliver and Felix walking in, and it's real for real. And also it gave us so many idiosyncrasies in the, when you come across real locations, it's great to then respond to those. And Emerald absolutely did that. Again, the writer directors enable, you know, she was turning on a sixpence, right, with this staircase, let's do this here, you know, it was fascinating and very satisfying to work in that environment.
So you've got the real family and the fake family living in the mansion at the same time while you're shooting this.
Yeah.
Wow. That stately mansion in the film is obviously a lead character in itself, which I imagine is kind of the ultimate creative high for a production designer. Your eye is really the lens we're viewing this complex dance through.
Yeah, it's funny because when we I mean, we did do quite a lot to that house, but I can remember at the beginning saying, tell everyone this was a backlot at Pinewood, and we built all of it. But yeah, no, it was amazing for a designer to have that base sort of starting point. Even all the beautiful artwork that they did have, we used some of it and then we enhanced and added our own art, and obviously furniture, that's all ours. And just characterizing that house was just a joy to do. It gave and gave and gave. And yeah, I couldn't have lucked out more than having such a wonderful location family to let us do that.
Were you able to manipulate the script at all to suit things you were doing with the property?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for instance, there wasn't really anything set in the square pond, and that pond is so fantastic. So Emerald adapted the script for some sunbathing sequences there, and we built the pontoon and added the lilies, and it just became such a power. I mean, I love those sequences when we're looking at the house, because it looks like the house is leaning back sunbathing as well, with a cigarette and a gin and tonic, you know, along with Rosamund and Richard E. Grant. So those sort of things. There wasn't a maze. There were elements of formal gardens that we enhanced to create our maze, and that was really satisfying to do, because it's about collaboration with construction, obviously, but VFX, editing, and with Emerald, understanding what we can provide and what she required. And I think that worked really wonderfully. And the fact that we got some contemporary artists involved in allowing us to use their work was quite exciting as well. You know, we had some model makers make the Minotaurs in the style of Nicola Hicks, who couldn't have been more well, she to allow us to use her as inspiration was brilliant, really good.
How closely did you work with your cinematographer and lighting designer on this, Suzie? I mean, to generate that, I mean, the mood, as you said, is ultra, it's intense, it's sinister and dark and kind of frivolous at the same time.
Yeah.
And the storyline.
Yeah, well, I think that triangle of the director, DOP, and designer was very strong. And I think, again, we hit the ground pretty solidly early on. DOPs often come on a little bit later than a designer. So we'd already sort of decided this is the house and this is the palette and this is what we're doing. But when Linus turned up, he's such a collaborative DOP, and it became a really lovely banter of what about this, what about that. So for instance, the birthday sequence scene, we knew we wanted to go very red in that environment, but that's a beautifully painted wall. I obviously wasn't going to touch the walls there. But to use the slash curtains, I thought again, that's the perfect antithesis of what Emerald was after, that sort of beauty and tackiness, you know, that got this gorgeous oil painted staircase with these tacky slash curtains, with a DOP who can light it so it goes, you know, it completely hums. There were those sort of moments where the stars aligned for us, and it was, yeah, very collaborative and satisfying consequently.
Well, we're going to wrap things there. Suzie Davies, good luck to you this coming awards season. Saltburn, starring Barry Cogan and Jacob Elordi is being released in theaters in limited distribution on November 27. Or excuse me, wide on November 22. Thanks for joining us at Gold Derby today.
Pleasure.
I'm Gold Derby News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm welcoming Kevin Thompson from the Netflix biopic Maestro to our film production designers Meet the Experts panel. Kevin, in chronicling the love story between composer-conductor Leonard Bernstein and his wife Felicia Montalegre, much is shot early on in black and white. How did that impact your production designs?
Well, I think when we started looking at the deep dive into the research of what was available, the decision early on was to shoot in black and white film and then different color stock films, depending on the era. And because it spanned so many decades, we felt that the imagery was very familiar in black and white, because that was what a lot of what we were seeing in the videos and in photographs from the period. So we thought that starting out in the tone for the romance of them meeting and before they got married and all that Tanglewood stuff, it was appropriate to do black and white and almost make it like a 40s movie. When you do black and white, you have to test the film stock to see how the colors react to it, so that some mid-tone colors all look the same, some colors turn to black. You want a certain amount of contrast, you want texture to sort of pop. So we did film stock tests and then used those as a guide to what happened with colors.
What was it like to craft your designs in part while shooting in the real-life Bernstein family home in Connecticut?
Well, the great thing about the real-life home was that it still contained a lot of the details of the family. So I was able to really feel an intimate connection to how they lived and how they raised how they spent their summers and how they raised their family, since the family was such an important part of the story. And I could take, like, for instance, Felicia's paintings were still on the walls. All the little personal scrapbooks were there. All the his original piano that he composed on. I could take the knowledge that I got from spending time in that home and spending time with the family into their other homes, the legendary Dakota apartment that we reconstructed, the Osborne apartment, even the early Carnegie Hall apartment that Bernstein used as a studio when he got his first break at Carnegie Hall.
I think I read that the Bernstein home hadn't been much updated since 1989. I guess
that's correct.
That's what you
correct.
found.
Yeah, we adjusted things to make it fresher and adjusted for the period and got the details right depending on what decade we were in.
Clearly, the Bernstein children were incredibly supportive and collaborative.
Yeah.
Too. That had to make your job a whole lot easier.
It made it more interesting, yeah, because there is so much information to look at, and when you start doing a period movie about anything, you go deep into the tactical, tangible things that you want to get correct in the decades. But the Bernstein children would sit and tell stories about their parents, and again, it was so key for Bradley to get the emotional core of each scene correct, and it had to be through understanding and the intimate details of these two characters. And I think that played a big role in the design, because you needed their life to the milieus of where they lived and their different homes, and also the concert halls and the worlds they lived in this sort of passionate, creative environment that they lived in New York and traveled a lot. You needed to get the emotional core right. And I think it really helped by getting into the family secrets.
Did they share a lot with you in terms of home appearance and set decoration?
No, they kind of left me alone for that. They were helpful when I had questions. They could tell me what year certain paintings were made by Felicia, so we could know if they were correct or not. We treated the periods, the different decades, kind of like a piece of music where we wanted it to lyrically flow from time period to time period with color, costume, palettes, without sort of stamping 1943, 1947, 1969. We wanted it to just feel like we were moving through time with them and feeling the decades and feeling the period that they were in by the clothes and the hairstyles and the backgrounds and the decoration.
And they opened up their private scrapbooks, Jamie and Nina and Alexander, to you also, didn't they? That had to take things to a deeper emotional level for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's an endless amount of information that you can read and watch on video, endless amount of photographs that you can obtain through other sources, but they somehow deepened the experience of the research.
You utilized a whole lot of different decades in the period design, which I imagine, Kevin, took some pretty deep technical research on your part.
Yeah, you start, as I was saying before, you start by getting each period right, and then you go to the non-tangible part and understand with Bradley how we wanted the scenes to transition from one to another, and how the emotional aspect of whatever was important in that scene could best be sort of filled in terms of the background that they were in, whether it be the home they were in, the bedroom for the argument with the Snoopy balloon, the details of those things, what was happening in that scene, what was, you know, you take it beyond the technical at a certain point and you start to you try to feed the story of the intimacy of these two people and their relationship, you know, which was a universal story. It still speaks to people today. I hope we can all take something from this and see something familiar, but you wanted to make it feel like it was of the period so that you could get a real feeling that this was authentically a creative couple living in this period in New York.
And you totally did. I mean, and especially with black and white and all that too, it really gives you that feeling. But you never felt like the children were peering over your shoulder and making sure.
No, they were never
their memory.
Yeah. They were never on set. They were a useful tool during pre-production and a few questions while we were shooting, but they were never on set. They never had. Bradley had full control of what he wanted to do, the story he wanted to tell, and what he did was he found the story through his own deep dive research, but then it was filled in by having a relationship with the family. Yeah. Which is why it's not really a biopic as much as it is a sort of classic love story, I think.
Yeah, and certainly a slice of the family life is you're right. It isn't a classic biopic. It doesn't take him from childhood through death.
Right.
How closely did you work with Bradley? He is, after all, the writer, director, producer, star.
Extremely.
He washed the dishes too, probably.
Yeah, he would come to set every morning, like if it was a 7 o'clock call, in character, and he would block and plan the first shot in character. He'd already been in hair and makeup from anywhere from 2 to 5 hours, and wardrobe. And even during pre-production, we had a lot of pre-production time. He lives a few blocks from me, so we could spend a lot face to face. And he would even do meetings in the character, practicing the voice he would do meetings with me, and we got in it very deeply together. And he was an incredible sort of conductor of his team of filmmakers. He sort of understood what each person did really well. And he was an incredible leader in terms of giving us all a connection to the other departments so that we could work together and make it a solid vision. And I think that really credits a great director when they can do that.
No question. We're going to wrap things there. Kevin Thompson, good luck to you this coming awards season.
Thank you.
Maestro, starring Bradley Cooper and Carey Mulligan, hits theaters in limited release on November 22, before streaming on Netflix beginning December 20th. Thanks for joining us today at Gold Derby.
Thank you.
Welcome to this special Gold Derby Meet the Experts Film Production Design Roundtable. I'm News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm joined today by production designers Steve Saklad of the Lionsgate feature Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret, Arthur Max of Ridley Scott's Napoleon, Suzie Davies of Emerald Fennell's Saltburn, and Kevin Thompson of the Bradley Cooper biopic Maestro. Thank you for joining us and welcome. It's exciting to have what may be the greatest collection of production design talent ever to appear on the same Zoom screen.
I agree.
Yeah, where do we send the money?
We'll go talk about that later. The four of you here today are representing period films, some more period than others. And I'm wondered if you found that designing projects set in a different time is more challenging than stories that are more contemporary, or if it just depends. Steve, let's start with you.
It's funny because for me, the periodness is a wonderful crutch to lean on. When you're doing a contemporary movie, you're sort of really stuck without cheats. You have to go right to the core of the story, and there's no pretty drapes or pretty period choices that can sort of give you a leg up. So with a period movie, you have more tools to play with, and if you have the memory of the period, all the richer. But there is a sense that it can you can fall too much in love with the period details and lose the sort of core of the story you're trying to tell. So it's a plus and a minus.
Arthur, what about you?
Well, I've been struggling to get back to the present day for a very long time.
We'll trade.
But there's such a rich variety of period. I'm trying to do them all. And I find it very, informative just doing the research and the history. I'm more comfortable than I am in the future, for sure. I've done a few futuristic films. They have their challenges, but they're not a passion of mine. I was trained as an architect, and I love period architecture. It's the mother of all things, I think.
Yeah, you seem to be going back in time these days, back now to the 18th and 19th centuries. Yeah, Kevin, what about you?
I was just going to add to what was just said, in that my training is in architecture history, art history, and I think it's really fun to learn by going to another time period and research and see what clicks. It's a really fun technical challenge. I think that you just can't get too lost in the exact periodness of the period, because every year that is represented, it means that you go from that period back, So contemporary movies are quite often not considered for awards as much as period pieces, especially Academy Awards. And I think that contemporary pieces are really challenging to do and deserve more credit for designers. I think that you go through a lot of a similar kind of process, and it sometimes doesn't get considered in the same way as something that has an incredibly beautiful period location.
And I think you're right, Kevin, that period pieces seem, are considered more awards worthy for some reason. And you, Suzie, I know Saltburn in particular wasn't set all that long ago, as you said, 2006, but still period piece.
Yeah, I think it's like the others have said. It's fascinating to do the research on period pieces. I've always felt that once you've done the research and you're prepped for a period piece, you sort of then throw it away because it needs to be, led by the story, by the script, and sometimes you can get waylaid in making almost a documentary of the period. And to be quite honest, I've done some period films where it's great, where we throw that out of the window, and you just let yourself be inspired by your research rather than being strict about it, and that's quite freeing and really fun to play with. So on Mr. Turner, we had 1970s bed linen, but it worked. Not one, we didn't get a phone call, no one phoned in, but it just worked. It's about feeling your instincts and your gut.
Yeah.
Research is done, works. Yeah.
I think that's really well said. I couldn't agree more. It's when you get to the point where you know the period so well that you can throw it away and just use your instincts and follow the story. That's the point you want to get to.
Yeah.
Really well said.
High five.
Yeah.
Can I just say the other aspect of period work that I really enjoy is making things from scratch when you can't find anything, as Suzie was talking about, and working with craftsmen and the craftsmanship that goes into it. And I think that's an aspect of our work that's it's diminished over the period of my career, from when I began as an art department assistant. The crafts traditions were very, very strong, and the apprenticeship system was alive and well. And subsequently, I've seen it people want to sit at desks and work computers now, not stick their hands in buckets of plaster so much.
Yeah.
And mix paints. It's hard to find a painter who can match a color these days.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, in a way, our job is sort of closer to the crafts thing than all the people working underneath us, because in a way we are still handling swatches and pushing chips of color next to each other and touching things. And then our art directors and our, all the team underneath are working the computers, but I kind of stay as far away from the computers as I can for most of what my job is. Even my sketches are done old school on paper, and then I'll take an iPhone picture of it in order to turn it into a digital distribution, but it's still old school.
It's reassuring to know that what some crafts people do isn't just CGI, isn't just on a screen, that you're actually doing hands-on stuff.
I think the back of a fag packet drawing is still one of the most important tools we have. You're on a location in the rain, you've run out of battery on your phone or your iPad, and you've got to explain there and then what you're doing. Get a fag packet, scribble on it, and that is so important to do it there and then. Yeah.
Yeah, people don't smoke in the scout vans in America anymore.
Yeah. I'd be really stuck.
Well, I'm going to move to another question here. I wondered how each of you ensure authenticity, so your designs don't look like mere sets and props on camera. Do you have maybe some kind of visual test you run everything through? And was there ever a time when you remember something didn't quite meet your standards? Now it can be told. Let's go kind of in reverse order with you. Start with you, Kevin.
Well, I think it was authenticity was one of the first things that Bradley brought up, authenticity and intimacy. And I just have to echo a little bit of how I found it, which was we learned the periods, we learned as much as we could about these characters, and then we threw it away. We felt that we knew them, and we would make decisions based on the emotional point of the story or what was going on at the time, and we would trust our instincts about what felt authentic. And we didn't care if the exact detail was exact right for the year or something like that. We would be able to look at the broader aspect of it. So I'll just say that again, which I've already kind of said before. But
thank you. And how about you, Suzie?
So yeah, there are a couple of questions there, and one I'm going to respond to is the authenticity of the sets, not necessarily on Saltburn, but often I have this thing with my set decorator that we call the hairy hand, where we'll dress the set, and I like to sort of present my set to the director, you know, during the shoot. So I sort of manipulate how they're going to see the set for the first time, and I make sure there's, wherever possible, there's not a lighting rig that has taken half the wall out and half the furniture out. So they see it as it's supposed to be for the first time, and ideally they get to rehearse in it and all those lovely indulgent episodes, but often it doesn't happen. But sometimes, and it's psychological really, is working out who owns that set, because I want the director and the actors to own it. There's a point when we give it to the shooting crew. It's no longer ours, it's someone else's, and that sort of passing on of what we've done, and then you let the sparks rip out the walls and everything. My set decorator and I have this hairy hand where sometimes we'll dress something really unusual that's completely wrong within the set to allow the director to move it, and then they own it, so they can go, I love all of this, but that tie on that curtain is wrong, you know.
So true.
Gone right, perfect, there's now. And I probably shouldn't have said this on this format, because they'll look for the hairy hand now. But yeah, sometimes that can be quite manipulative, but I think it's about one of my worst things is not being able to hand over a set fully dressed to a director, because as much as we've plotted it in prep and they've seen the visuals, and they might have seen it on halfway finished, if we're on one of those crazy schedules and the first time they see it is the first time they're going to shoot on it, it has to look in its best light for them to see it. And I try very hard to try and factor that into the schedule. You know, can it get there, you know, an hour earlier or the day before, the night before, so we can dress. A bit like selling a house, you know. My set decorator would also, you know, if she had a chance, she'd be boiling the coffee and making bread in the house, in the room, so that the director but it's about instilling confidence in the director, so they don't need to worry about us, it's now theirs, and, you know, fill your boots. Yeah.
How about you, Arthur? How do you guard against something looking artificial or phony in a shot?
Well, for me, it's all about techniques of aging on different levels. There's nothing I like better than putting on a pair of heavy-duty gloves, grabbing a chain and bashing the set bits, door frames and dirty wax, smearing it all over the place and making everybody rub it off. And it's a lot of effort. I mean, you get the set to a certain level. If you take Susie's point about scheduling, and less you have the time to massage the set, to put it politely, and to make it look lived in and worn and weathered, especially in period where you could be dealing with hundreds of years of age, and the storytelling of the layers of age and the peeled off age and what's behind it, and on and on. And in this digital age of ours, that accommodation and being able to give it that much texture is disappearing.
Good point. Finally, you, Steve?
Yeah, for Margaret, there are a couple of instances of success and less success in terms of authenticity. One thing that we did that was very successful was the previous owners of the house in New Jersey. So we had a beautiful old grass cloth covering on the living room walls, and we carefully planned all of the previous owners' paintings that had hung on the walls and had discolored the parts of the walls, so that with those templates removed, we had a real feeling that there had been people in history before these people moved into the house. That was a success. I came in with a very short amount of prep left to go on the show, and so basically the first choice we made had to be the choice that we went with in almost every case. They had fallen in love with a synagogue that for a 1970s set Upper West Side congregation was patently wrong, because the building was built in 1996 and it was contemporary, and I knew Upper West Side synagogues in contemporary style didn't exist for our story. Had to let it go, praying that the edit of the movie wouldn't feature these stained glass windows from 1996, and of course there's huge beauty shots of the windows in the final movie. So you just have to sort of let it go and say, somewhere in the world there was a temple that looked like that in 1970. So we'll call it okay.
Fabulous. Well, we're going to wrap things there. Once again, our esteemed panelists have been Steve Saklad for Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. Arthur Max for Napoleon, Suzie Davies for Saltburn, and Kevin Thompson for Maestro. Best of luck to the four of you this coming award season, and thanks for joining us today at Go Derby.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you guys. That was fun.
You too. It was great. Thank you.
I get you guys.